It was a quiet afternoon in Perth. The son returned home, just like any other day. The front door was still closed. The bathroom faucet was still running, but his mother would never answer again. When the door was finally opened, what he saw wasn't someone who had fainted. It was the beginning of a dark mystery that has yet to be solved. It's hard to believe that the man tied to that horrifying moment was none other than Rebelo, someone once seen as the picture of perfection. From the outside, Andre's life in Perth seemed like a dream. He lived in a sleek, modern house with Gracie Piscopo and their son, enjoying all the luxuries most people could only wish for. On social media, they appeared to be the perfect couple, wealthy, famous, and surrounded by glamour. But long before their life became so dazzling, Andre and Gracie's relationship started in a way that seemed completely ordinary. They met in 2015, when Andre was just 19 years old. From their very first conversations, he was captivated by Gracie's confidence and her unapologetic ambition. Gracie, for her part, always dreamed of becoming famous and well-known. In the beginning, she worked as a receptionist at a small gym. Sometime later, she started posting personal photos on social media, and that's when everything changed. Her confidence, taste in fashion, and relentless effort helped her attract a large following. She transformed from an ordinary employee into a powerful influencer, earning about $170,000 per year. Thanks to that success, Gracie could afford to spend freely on high-end fashion, luxurious getaways, and stays at the most exclusive hotels. Andre, who had never been part of that world, was gradually swept into it. Together, they traveled, documented their adventures, and shared a lifestyle filled with shopping halls, luxury cars, and breathtaking views from around the world. From a follower's perspective, their life was nothing short of inspirational. A beautiful woman with a thriving career, a supportive partner always by her side, and a child who completed the image of the perfect family. As Gracie's fame grew, Andre remained mostly in the background. He took on more and more responsibilities behind the scenes, including managing sponsorships, business deals, and finances, until it became too much to bear. Under the weight of that pressure, Andre made a life-altering decision. He dropped out of college to fully commit to supporting Gracie's influencer career. He became her full-time assistant, handling contract negotiations, vetting brand deals, and managing her financial portfolio. Despite the heavy workload, he earned just $20,000 a year in that role. Whenever Andre appeared on Gracie's social media, it was usually off to the side or somewhere in the background. Gracie was always the star of the frame, featured in carefully curated photos and videos. Then came the birth of their son, which only added to the family's picture-perfect image in the eyes of their growing fan base. Not wanting to remain in a supporting role forever, Andre began searching for a path of his own. He shifted his focus to cryptocurrency, a world far removed from the image-based realm Gracie had built. To him, it was an opportunity to take control, make decisions independently, and create success through his own efforts. From the family's perspective, Andre's mother, Colleen Rebelo, couldn't hide her concern. She noticed her son changing, becoming more distant, no longer the family-oriented man he once was. His relationship with Gracie had also grown colder, as Andre increasingly immersed himself in the digital world and drifted further from the real-life connection that had once bound them together. In Colleen's mind, Andre should have followed a more stable path. As a mother of 4, 3 sons and 1 daughter, she had always placed great importance on education and having a clear career trajectory. When Andre dropped out of college to focus entirely on managing Gracie's influencer business, Colleen couldn't help but worry, especially as she saw her son drifting away from the values she had instilled in him. To her, social media was an unstable environment. Fame could vanish after a single post, and audience interest was always chasing after the next new thing. What worried her most was the thought that if Andre and Gracie ever fell out of that fame cycle, they'd have nothing solid to fall back on. She didn't keep these concerns to herself. Colleen often shared her thoughts with a close friend she trusted deeply. She saw Andre as gambling his future on a short-term lifestyle, chasing appearances rather than building a solid foundation for himself. Despite her worries, Colleen chose to continue guiding her children with the same values she had lived by for years. Ever since her marriage ended in 2010, she had worked as a teacher while single-handedly raising all 4 kids. Every day brought new challenges, but she gave them love, structure, and core values to grow on. After dedicating so many years to her family, it wasn't until her children were grown that Colleen began pursuing her own dreams. When she finally had the time to focus on herself, she made the decision to return to school in 2020. She proudly completed her degree, allowing her to begin a new journey in the healthcare field. At 58 years old, Colleen stepped into a new chapter with optimism and hope for what lay ahead. The morning of May 25, 2020, unfolded like any other in the Rebelo household. Colleen chatted with a few of her children before getting ready for work. Fabian, her youngest son, was still living with her, while her only daughter, Monique, had temporarily moved back home after completing a paramedic training course. With the school located close by, Monique could easily manage her daily commute. That morning, both siblings were preparing for their individual schedules. Fabian worked part-time at a local supermarket and had asked his mother to drop him off at 10 a.m., with plans for her to pick him up again around 2 p.m. But when Fabian's shift ended, his mother was nowhere to be seen. He called her cell phone a total of 13 times, but no one picked up. The walk home would have taken just 10 to 15 minutes, but the prolonged silence left him uneasy. Colleen had never been late before, never forgotten to pick him up. She was always punctual, attentive, and never left her children waiting. What worried Fabian even more was that his mother hadn't had any major health issues. Aside from a mild heart condition and Hashimoto's thyroiditis, a chronic illness she managed carefully, Colleen had always appeared strong, clear-headed, and in control. Fabian tried to stay calm, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong waiting for him at home. That's why, as soon as he arrived, Fabian paid close attention to every detail. The house was silent until he suddenly heard the sound of running water in the bathroom. For a moment, it calmed him down. Maybe she was in the shower and hadn't noticed the time. But then again, she hadn't answered any of his previous calls, and now she wasn't responding even as he called out to her from right outside the door. His anxiety grew with every passing second. Reluctantly, Fabian stepped closer. He hadn't wanted to disturb her, but the silence had stretched too long. He couldn't wait any longer. As he opened the bathroom door, a scene that would haunt him forever appeared before his eyes. Colleen was kneeling on the floor, her back leaning against the wall, eyes closed, completely motionless, as if she had collapsed long ago. Shocked and trembling, Fabian pulled her into the middle of the bathroom and covered her with a towel. His hands shaking, he immediately called emergency services and began CPR while waiting for help. But as he leaned closer to her face, he noticed something that made his heart sink. Her skin was ice cold, even though the water was still warm, and her face and neck had turned a pale bluish color. The paramedics arrived and began working on her immediately, but it was too late. Colleen was pronounced dead at the scene. Fabian grabbed his phone and messaged his sister Monique, urging her to come home right away. He didn't want to be alone, especially not after watching their mother die right in front of him. He then tried calling their older brother, Andre, but the phone just rang with no answer. It wasn't until around 3 p.m. that Andre finally showed up, along with Gracie and their young son, after Monique had repeatedly called and messaged him. The atmosphere in the house was filled with shock and disbelief. Just hours earlier, Fabian and Monique had spoken with Colleen as usual. She had been calm, alert, and responding clearly to everything they said. No one in the family could make sense of what was happening. Colleen had made no complaints about feeling unwell, and there were no signs of illness or fatigue. And yet, just a few hours later, she was gone. An autopsy was performed in search of answers, but the results yielded nothing conclusive. The more they thought about it, the 3 siblings simply couldn't accept that their mother had passed away in such an inexplicable way. Colleen had been healthy, full of energy, and sharp in conversation. And yet, suddenly, everything ended far too quickly. They started to notice subtle oddities, particularly the timing of her death, her unusually pale complexion, and Andre's behavior throughout that afternoon. Their suspicions grew when Fabian noticed something strange in the bathroom. Colleen had always taken off her gold watch before showering, yet this time it was still on her wrist. Even more unusual, she hadn't removed the jewelry she normally would never bring into the bathroom. Most telling of all, the non-slip bath mat she always laid down inside the tub had been folded over the edge, completely unused. Still, the initial police investigation found nothing out of the ordinary. There were no signs of forced entry. Both the front and back doors, along with the windows, had been securely locked. Nothing in the house appeared disturbed or out of place. With no clear cause of death and no evidence of foul play, authorities ruled Colleen's passing as the result of natural causes. It seemed as though everything was settled, until an unexpected call came in from an insurance company. They weren't investigating the cause of death, but rather suspected a case of fraud. During an internal audit, the company discovered documents that appeared to be forged, and the name linked to the suspicious file? Andre Rebelo. From that moment, a chain of alarming details began to surface. Just 1 week before Colleen's sudden death, Andre had taken out 3 separate life insurance policies under her name. The total coverage exceeded $1 million, and in every policy, he was listed as the sole beneficiary. None of his siblings were included. Just days after Colleen's death, Andre contacted each insurance provider and began the claims process to receive payouts. However, the process didn't go as smoothly as he had hoped. 2 of the companies immediately flagged irregularities and denied the claims, citing how unusually short the time was between the policy signings and Colleen's passing. Only 1 company continued with the review process, but required Andre to submit additional documents. Among the submitted forms was one that listed the wrong date of birth for Colleen. Ironically, it matched Andre's own birth date. Things only got more suspicious as Andre continued submitting documents. While they arrived quickly, several showed glaring inconsistencies. One medical document stated that Colleen had died from a cerebral aneurysm leading to subarachnoid hemorrhage. However, this contradicted the official forensic report issued by the authorities. Even more startling was the emergence of a will, allegedly written and signed by Colleen, that named Andre as the sole heir to her entire estate. None of her other children were mentioned, and no division of assets was outlined. To the family, this was not only shocking but completely at odds with the way Colleen had always strived to treat her children equally. Following those controversial findings, the investigation quickly expanded, uncovering even more alarming irregularities. Andre had submitted falsified psychiatric evaluations in an attempt to legitimize the newly drafted will. But it didn't stop there. He also used artificial intelligence to generate a fake voice recording, supposedly to support the changes he had made. As suspicions continued to grow, Andre finally broke his silence to defend himself. He claimed that his mother had been fully aware of everything and insisted that the life insurance policies and the will were part of a long-term financial plan they had agreed upon. According to him, Colleen had entrusted him with full control over her assets on the condition that he would later divide the inheritance equally among his siblings. However, for the rest of the family, this wasn't just a painful loss. It felt like a betrayal by someone they loved. Their mother had passed away, and with her, their trust in Andre had shattered. What hurt the most was that Colleen had named only Andre in the will, excluding Monique, Fabian, and Julian, the very children who had always been there whenever she needed help the most. Even more puzzling was the fact that Colleen had always been known as a fair and balanced mother. She never played favorites, and her love was consistently and evenly shared among all her children. That was something each of them had felt throughout their lives. But what was unfolding now didn't match the woman they knew. It felt like a piece of the truth was still being hidden. That growing sense of confusion deepened when Julian, the eldest sibling, moved into their mother's house to begin sorting things out. Though grief still weighed heavily on him, he tried to bring order to the chaos. But while reviewing important documents, such as her driver's license and personal records, Julian was stunned to find that all of them were missing. Things escalated further when Andre admitted to taking the documents, claiming it was simply to make estate management easier. Not long after, the family was once again blindsided every piece of Colleen's mail had been rerouted to Andre's private residence. This was especially odd since Fabian and Monique were still living in her house, with no clear reason to change the mailing address. The mounting suspicions fueled tension throughout the family, and at that point, the police began to widen their investigation. They re-interviewed not only Colleen's children, but also Gracie, Andre's wife, and other close relatives. As the inquiry grew deeper, Colleen's sister unexpectedly came forward with a detail that left everyone stunned. At around 1:30 p.m. on the day of the incident, she had walked past the house and noticed a strange car parked in the driveway. At the time, she didn't think much of it, but during the funeral a few days later, she saw that exact same vehicle again, and this time, what caught her attention was Andre and Gracie stepping out of it. That revelation immediately created a serious contradiction with Andre's earlier statements. In reality, he had been at the house that afternoon, much later than what he had originally told police. What shocked the family even more was that none of his siblings had ever heard Andre mention visiting their mother on the day she died. When directly questioned by police, Andre finally admitted he had stopped by Colleen's house on the morning of May 25th and stayed for about 45 to 50 minutes. During that time, he claimed she seemed tired, voiced concerns about aging, and at one point even said that life didn't feel meaningful anymore. Based on that account, Andre explained that he had signed the insurance policies in her name out of concern for her well-being and to secure the family's financial future in case something happened. However, Gracie's version of events sent the investigation in a very different direction. She stated that around noon that day, she and her cousin were getting ready to head out for lunch, as previously planned. That's when Gracie noticed that Andre had suddenly disappeared. He hadn't said where he was going or left any message. She called him 12 times, none of which were answered. Frustrated after waiting too long, she eventually stopped trying. Andre finally reappeared around 2 p.m., acting completely normal, as if nothing unusual had happened. Though deeply suspicious, Gracie remained silent. But right before the two left the house for lunch, something suddenly unsettled her. She remembered that Andre had texted his mother earlier that day, asking if she could babysit their son that evening. That detail, combined with other growing inconsistencies, pushed police further. They quickly obtained a court order to secretly surveil Andre and Gracie's home. Investigators installed listening devices in the bedroom and hidden cameras in the living room. For the next 3 months, every conversation was recorded, hoping to uncover any hidden truth. Through this surveillance, a disturbing picture began to emerge. The recordings revealed that Gracie had no prior knowledge of the insurance policies. When she found out, she was furious and immediately confronted Andre. Being dragged into a scandal of that magnitude not only threatened her reputation, but also put her sponsorships and brand deals at serious risk. Not long after, in one of the recorded conversations, she warned Andre that if he had actually killed his mother and the truth came out, he would end up in prison. But Andre didn't seem scared. On the contrary, he expressed confidence that he'd eventually collect a large insurance payout and had already started planning his escape abroad. Andre's calm demeanor in the face of such serious accusations left investigators baffled. After all, on social media, he and Gracie projected the image of a perfect couple, impeccably styled, dressed in designer fashion, vacationing at luxury resorts, and posing beside their pristine white Range Rover in every carefully curated post. But as the layers of glamour were peeled away, the truth behind their seemingly perfect life began to emerge. The house they flaunted online was, in fact, a rental, costing $880 per week. The luxury car they drove was sponsored, not personally owned. Even their lavish vacations were paid for by brands in exchange for promotional content. Behind the curated perfection lay a life buried in debt. At the time of Colleen's death, they owed over $120,000, with rent and car payments regularly overdue. Gracie also had an outstanding tax bill of $40,000, a debt she was completely unaware of because Andre managed all their finances. And the cryptocurrency investments Andre touted as their financial salvation? After 3 years, they had returned a mere $22. Facing the collapse of everything, Andre began desperately searching for a way out. He purchased 3 life insurance policies in his mother's name, listing himself as the sole beneficiary. If the plan succeeded, it would have brought in over $1 million. With that money, Andre hoped not only to pay off their debts, but also to fabricate a narrative that his crypto investments had finally paid off. But that plan couldn't hold up forever. In November 2022, Andre was arrested and later formally charged with the murder of his mother. The first trial began in October 2024 and lasted more than 8 weeks. Throughout the proceedings, there was no physical evidence strong enough to directly tie Andre to the alleged crime. Prosecutors, however, presented circumstantial details to strengthen their case. They argued that someone could be suffocated without leaving clear marks on the body. From that theory, small abrasions on Colleen's arms and eyebrows were interpreted as possible signs of a struggle or restraint. Another theory proposed that a pillow had been used to smother her, though this remained unconfirmed. Adding to their argument was a timeline of events that contradicted Andre's own statements. His aunt testified that she had seen a car parked outside Colleen's home at 1:30 p.m., while Andre claimed he had already left earlier. During that same time, he ignored multiple phone calls from Gracie, behavior considered unusual based on his previous patterns. Investigators also uncovered disturbing digital and legal irregularities. After July 2020, Andre wiped all data from his personal computer, including files and browsing history. Shortly afterward, he purchased the 3 life insurance policies, just days before Colleen's death. Alongside them came a slew of falsified documents: an invalid will, altered medical records, manipulated psychiatric reports, and an AI-generated voice recording. All of it pointed to a calculated effort to derail the investigation. Despite the overwhelming evidence and arguments presented in court, Andre continued to maintain his innocence. However, after 48 hours of deliberation, on December 5, 2024, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of murder, with a sentence of life in prison. From the moment that sentence was read, the Andre Rebelo case ceased to be just a tragic story of a broken family. It became a chilling reflection of the dark reality behind those perfect photos we often see on social media. When the illusion fades, all that remains is pain, betrayal, and a haunting question few dare to ask: is it ever worth sacrificing everything for money and fleeting fame? What are your thoughts on this case? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next true crime story.